To speak more about proactivity is sophomore Mia Cheng.
One day this past summer, I was in San Francisco with my friend. Just two girls alone in the city. It was a typical cold, foggy San Francisco day, and the scream of the wind made it seem almost as if the weather was howling a low warning. But despite the bellowing noise, I could still clearly hear them catcalling us. When we were walking down the street, I noticed that a car behind us had begun to slow down until it was going the same pace as us. The windows rolled down and I could see a few men inside, maybe 20 to 30 years old. And whether it was the blanket of fog or just other people's obliviousness, no one had really noticed that these men had been catcalling us for over 4 blocks. And this was in the middle of the day, in public. Traffic hadn't slowed, and people on the sidewalk had barely even looked up. As they continued to make cruder and cruder remarks, I could feel my skin crawl in discomfort. And I remember thinking, if they left their car to assault me right now, I would have no idea what to do. I would freeze. We sped up our walking so that we were practically running, and my heart was beating like a drum, so loud and so fast that it outpaced even the tempo of my steps. And this feeling, this dread that I experienced, it isn't an uncommon feeling. Even if we don't go looking for danger, at some point in our lives, danger will find us. So an essential part of the human experience is learning how to recognize and respond to these signs of approaching danger. Without it, we are defenseless. After a few more minutes of walking as fast as our legs would allow us and ignoring the men, they lost interest. But it could have just as easily have been 2 out of the 322,000 sexual assaults that happen in the United States every year. That's an assault every 98 seconds. 91% of these happen to women, and 50% from people to the age groups of 12 to 24 years old. And while these show a general pattern, we don't know exactly how accurate these statistics are, because 80% of sexual assaults aren't even reported. So these years are crucial when it comes to learning self-defense not only for ourselves, but also to teach the ones that we love. Self-defense is key in a world that's so filled with danger. It's inescapable. At some point in our lives, we have all experienced danger, whether it be in the scrape of a knee that could have turned into a broken bone, or on screen in an action movie that makes our heart pump 1,000,000 miles a minute. And yet, when we face a new type of danger, we freeze. So how can we truly be ready? How can we protect ourselves and the ones around us from the dangers in this world? Well, contrary to common belief, we don't need to know Taekwondo or karate to be able to properly defend ourselves. We only need basic knowledge. Now, everyone knows that we have 2 main responses to danger, right? Well, actually, we have 3. Allow me to introduce you to my favorite F words: flight, fight, and freeze. This third one that gets commonly left out is actually the one that we need to be most aware of. While running or fighting could get something accomplished, freezing almost never does. This reaction is therefore the most dangerous and the one that we have to best guard against. And having a prepared plan in advance is the way to prevent us from freezing in the face of danger. Now, in horror movies, who is always the first one to die? It's usually that one person who decides to go it alone and separates from the group. Don't be this person. When an attacker is looking for victims, they'll look for the isolated, unsuspecting victims. So be alert, don't look down at your phone, and travel in groups in well-lit areas. These will all send signals to the attacker that you are not an easy target. However, sometimes these conditions are unavoidable, and that's when things get tricky. So let's take a step back, and let's imagine. You're walking home from work, walking home from school, or just hanging out in the city. But it's dark, and you're alone. Now pause. Right now, spatial awareness is key. Always pay attention for suspicious activity. But what is suspicious activity? We often hear this term, but we don't really know what we're looking for. Suspicious activity includes anyone who is walking without a purpose. So someone loitering or walking around the same blocks multiple times. So let's say on this walk you notice that someone across the street from you is keeping pace with you, stopping whenever you stop, turning whenever you turn. This person crosses the street and asks for directions. Now, this is a common tactic many attackers use, asking questions that allow them to approach us. Now, this doesn't mean anyone who asks for directions is immediately an attacker, but knowing to be wary is good. When you're talking to this person, watch their movements and maintain your personal bubble. People with good intentions will naturally keep this space, and if they step in, a warning bell should go off in your head. So let's say they step in too close or make you feel uncomfortable in any way. Now what you want to do is get loud. Not necessarily screaming, but instead, when they touch you, immediately raise your arms, push back, and say, "Get back." You want to say this in a way that shows that you will not be an easy target by adding treble to your voice. This will not only tell the attacker that you are a fighter, but it will also signal the people around you for help. In most cases, the attacker will leave and try and find an easier target. But what if this is one of those rare cases where the attacker doesn't leave despite your efforts? You now have a decision to make, whether or not to fight back. For an example, if your attacker has a gun and they ask for your wallet, definitely hand it over. But in other cases, the choice is less obvious. Knowing when to fight back comes down to 3 things: body, life, and location. If your body is at risk of being sexually assaulted, you want to defend yourself against these advances. If your life is at stake, fighting back becomes the only option left to survive. If the stranger is trying to move your location by pushing you into a car or carrying you away, you want to have the fight now rather than later, so they will be less prepared and you can be found more easy. Waiting for the right moment that may or may not happen is too risky, and it's better to escape if you know where you are. So let's say that you determine that you have to fight. The anticipation and the adrenaline that has been building up in your system can be paralyzing. But know this: 3 out of the 4 people who fight back escape. Think about that feeling of dread and fear that sets in when your attacker comes at you, and realize that you can make them feel exactly the same thing when you fight them back. Use their fear of getting hurt and of getting caught against them. So now I'm going to give you some tips that you can actually use in a fight. When you strike, you want to use the sharpest or most powerful parts of your body. These include your head, your hands, your elbows, your knees, and your feet. So where on the attacker do we want to hit? We want to hit the areas that will inflict the most pain, the so-called pressure points. These include the face, the neck, the groin, the knees, and the leg. Strike the attacker according to position. For an example, if the stranger attacking you is too far to reach with your hand, don't try and hit them if instead you can reach them with a kick. When you do use your hand, keep your hand in a flat knife shape and use the side of your hand when you strike. This will avoid the broken bones that often come from punching. After you have landed a few blows, you will have a window. This is where you escape, you find help, and you call the police. So congrats, you've just successfully defended yourself against an imaginary attacker. Now that you know the basics, you should be able to work your way out of most, if not all, situations that you will encounter. Self-defense not only looks really cool and keeps you safe, but it teaches you hard work and while keeping you physically active. After my first self-defense class after the catcalling incident, I felt empowered. Just the knowledge that you can fight back makes you feel more confident and independent, which carries into relationships, sports, and work. The basic skills and techniques that you learn from these actual classes is what will kick in during danger. So I invite all people to grab a friend, take your kid, or invite your parents to a lesson of basic self-defense so you can get an actual physical experience for it. So yes, we live in a dangerous world, and fear can be overwhelming. And yes, there's danger in many aspects of our lives. But now that you know how to look for it and how to deal with it, we can better defend ourselves and those around us. By teaching others, you can make a huge difference in the safety of every individual of this world. We can change the number of people who fight back, who speak up, and who learn. Because although we live in a dangerous world, there's nothing more dangerous than being oblivious. Thank you.